After her father's funeral, a black girl was kicked out by her stepmother, but her millionaire brother arrived. Saturday morning in Atlanta was dense and gray, with heavy clouds threatening rain over Oak Hill Cemetery. Aisha Thompson, just 7 years old, clutched a small pink stuffed rabbit as she watched the mahogany coffin slowly being lowered into the ground. Inside was Michael Thompson, the only father she had ever known, the man who adopted her when she was just 2 years old after her biological parents died in a car accident. Michael had been a respected engineer in the Thompson family construction business, a dynasty that had built skyscrapers throughout Georgia for 3 generations. When he decided to adopt Aisha, he faced strong opposition from some family members, especially his second wife, Patricia Hartwell, a 45-year-old white socialite who saw the adoption as an error in judgment that would tarnish the family's reputation. For 5 years, Michael shielded Aisha like a protective shield from Patricia's subtle and not-so-subtle comments. He took her fishing on Lake Lanier, helped her with her homework every night, and always said, "You are my daughter, Aisha. No matter what anyone says, you will always have a home with me." But now, at age 52, a massive heart attack had taken Michael, leaving Aisha vulnerable in a world that had never truly accepted her. Patricia stood a few feet behind Aisha, dressed in an elegant black Chanel suit, her platinum blonde hair pulled back into a perfect bun. To those attending the funeral, she looked like the ideal grieving widow. But behind her Ray-Ban sunglasses, her cold eyes were calculating. For years, she had tolerated Aisha's presence only because Michael had insisted. Now that he was dead, there was nothing stopping her from doing what she had always wanted to do: remove that intruder from her privileged life. As the pastor concluded the final prayers and the mourners began to disperse, Patricia approached Aisha. Her voice, normally sweet when Michael was present, now had a tone as sharp as broken glass. "Pack your things when we get home. You no longer live with us." Aisha looked at Patricia with her big brown eyes filled with tears. "But Aunt Patty, Daddy said this would always be my home." Her voice was small and broken, still processing the enormity of losing the only relative who loved her. "Your father is no longer here to make reckless decisions," Patricia replied coldly, adjusting her leather gloves. "I should have prevented this adoption from the start. A child like you simply does not belong in our family." The words "a child like you" carried a racial venom that Aisha, despite her young age, was beginning to understand. She had heard similar whispers at family gatherings, seen the disapproving looks when she held Michael's hand in public, felt Patricia's coldness whenever they were alone. But Michael always reassured her, always made her feel loved and protected. The drive back to the Thompson mansion in the upscale Buckhead neighborhood was made in sepulchral silence. The Georgian colonial-style house, with its imposing white columns and perfectly manicured gardens, had always been the dream home for Aisha. Michael had turned the 3rd floor into a personal playground for her, complete with a children's library, play area, and a telescope for stargazing. As soon as they entered, Patricia wasted no time. "You have 1 hour to pack. Take only the essentials. The clothes your father bought stay here. They are too expensive for where you are going." She turned to the housekeeper, Maria Santos, a middle-aged Latina woman who had worked for the family for 15 years. "Maria, help her pack only the basics. No electronics, no jewelry, just simple clothes." Maria, who had cared for Aisha like a second mother, began to cry silently. She knew she couldn't openly defy Patricia without losing her job, but her heart broke seeing the child she had helped raise being treated like disposable trash. "Senora Patricia, please," she pleaded softly. "La Nina just lost her father. Maybe we can." "Do you want to keep your job, Maria?" Patricia interrupted with an icy stare. "Then do as I say and keep your opinions to yourself." Aisha slowly climbed the stairs to her room, each step feeling like a mountain. The room Michael had decorated especially for her, with African princess wallpaper and a castle-shaped bed, now looked like a museum of a life that was being brutally ripped away from her. She grabbed some basic clothes, her toothbrush, and of course, the pink stuffed rabbit Michael had given her on her first day in the house. When she came downstairs with her small school backpack, the only luggage Patricia had allowed, she found Patricia on the phone with someone about finally solving this problem. The woman hung up when she saw Aisha and pointed to the front door. "Let's go. You don't belong here anymore." But before they left, Patricia stopped abruptly in the hallway, as if she had remembered something. A cruel smile crossed her perfectly made-up face. "You know what, Aisha? Before you leave, there's one last lesson I need to teach you about your place in the world." Patricia disappeared into the kitchen and returned carrying a bucket of cold water. Aisha instinctively backed away, her eyes filling with terror as she recognized the sadistic expression on her stepmother's face. "Aunt Patty, please, I didn't do anything wrong." "Your very existence is wrong enough," Patricia spat venomously. "For 5 years I had to pretend you were welcome in this house. Now it's time for you to learn the truth about who you really are." Patricia raised the bucket, preparing to pour the icy water over Aisha, when the front door burst open. James Thompson, 49, entered the house carrying fresh flowers. He had come to offer belated condolences, unaware that the funeral had been that morning. The scene James witnessed left him petrified. His sister-in-law Patricia, elegantly dressed in mourning, was holding a bucket of water over a small terrified black child whom he immediately recognized from the photos Michael used to send years ago. Aisha was cowering against the wall, clutching a child's backpack and a stuffed rabbit, clearly in a state of total panic. "What the hell is going on here?" James roared, his voice echoing off the walls of the mansion. Patricia jumped, nearly dropping the bucket. "James, I wasn't expecting you today. I thought you were away on business." "Clearly," James said, his voice low and dangerous. He walked slowly toward Patricia, his eyes fixed on the bucket in her hands. "Patricia, explain to me exactly why you are about to throw cold water on a 7-year-old child on the day of her father's funeral." "You don't understand the situation," Patricia began, trying to regain her composure. "This child needs to learn discipline. Michael spoiled her, and now that he's gone, someone needs to teach her about reality." James looked at Aisha, who was trembling against the wall. Her large brown eyes, so much like Michael's, were filled with tears and terror. In that moment, James saw not just a frightened child, but the daughter his brother had loved enough to adopt against all family opposition. "Aisha," James said softly, kneeling down to her level. "Do you remember me? I'm James, your daddy's brother." Aisha nodded shyly, still hugging her rabbit. "Daddy talked about you sometimes. He said you were too busy to visit." The child's simple honesty hit James like a punch in the stomach. Michael had covered for him all these years, protecting both Aisha and James from the consequences of their foolish fight. "Aisha, where are your things? Your clothes, your toys?" "Aunt Patty said I can only take this backpack," Aisha whispered. "She said the other things are too expensive for where I'm going." James turned to Patricia, and she recoiled at the cold fury in his eyes. Over decades of building a business empire, James had learned to control his anger and use it strategically. "Patricia, you're going upstairs right now and bringing down all of Aisha's things. Everything. Clothes, toys, books, everything Michael bought for her." "James, you have no authority here," Patricia tried to protest. "I am the legal widow, and this child is my responsibility until I hand her over to social services." "You're right about one thing," James said, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "You no longer have authority over this child. I'm calling my lawyer right now to initiate emergency custody proceedings." Patricia turned pale. "You can't do that. You don't even know this child." "You're right," James admitted, looking at Aisha with deep remorse. "I don't know my niece as well as I should. That's something I intend to correct immediately." While James spoke on the phone with Robert Martinez, his personal attorney, explaining the emergency situation, Patricia tried one last gambit. "James, be reasonable. You're single, you work 16 hours a day, you travel constantly. What do you know about raising a child? Especially a child like her?" The phrase "a child like her" echoed in the air like a confession of racism that Patricia couldn't disguise. James ended his call and turned to her with utter contempt. "Patricia, I may not know much about raising children, but I know one thing for sure. I know the difference between right and wrong. And what you were doing when I got here was deeply wrong." He knelt down again beside Aisha. "Sweetheart, I know you don't know me very well, and I understand if you're scared. But you're my brother's daughter, which makes you my family. If you want, you can come live with me. I promise I'll take care of you just like your dad would have wanted." Aisha looked between James and Patricia, quickly processing the situation with the keen intuition that traumatized children develop. "Do you promise you won't throw water on me and send me away?" The simple question revealed so much about what Aisha had suffered that James felt tears welling up in his eyes. "I promise, Aisha. You will never be treated that way again." Not while I'm breathing. Patricia, realizing she had completely lost control of the situation, threw the bucket on the floor with a crash. Fine. Take her. You'll find out what I've had to put up with all these years. She's not a normal child, James. She'll never fit into your world. You're right about one thing, James said, placing his hand protectively on Aisha's shoulder. She'll never fit into your world. Because your world is based on cruelty and prejudice. But in my world, the world I'm going to build for her, she'll fit in perfectly. Robert Martinez arrived at the Thompson mansion in Buckhead in record time, bringing with him a team of legal assistants and emergency custody papers. James had explained the situation over the phone, but seeing the reality in person was even more shocking to the experienced lawyer. Aisha was sitting on the living room couch, still hugging her stuffed rabbit, while James gently tried to talk to her. Patricia had taken refuge in her bedroom, claiming to be unwell after the initial confrontation. Maria Santos had prepared hot chocolate for Aisha and was quietly packing all of the girls' things into suitable bags. Mr. Thompson, Robert said quietly, I obtained a temporary court order based on neglect and possible abuse. We have emergency custody for 72 hours, but we will need a formal hearing on Monday to make it permanent. James nodded, keeping his eyes on Aisha. What else do we need to do? We need to document everything that happened today. The wet clothes, witnesses, any evidence of previous abuse. Robert paused. I also strongly recommend that Aisha be examined by a doctor and a child psychologist. Aisha, James said softly, approaching the sofa, this is Mr. Martinez. He's a lawyer who's going to help us make sure you stay safe. Aisha looked up, still cautious. Like Uncle James? Will you stay with me? If you want me to, James replied honestly. I know you don't know me very well yet, and I understand if you're scared. But I promise I'll do everything I can to take care of you. Aunt Patty said no one would want me because I'm different, Aisha whispered. She said Daddy only adopted me because he felt sorry for me. James felt a deep anger burn in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Aisha, your Aunt Patty was lying. Your daddy adopted you because he loved you. And I want to take care of you because you're family. Even though I'm black? The question came out with the brutal honesty that only children possess. James took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would define everything between them. Aisha, I'm not going to lie to you. When your dad first adopted you, I didn't understand. I thought it would be hard for you, and I was worried for the wrong reasons. I was wrong, and because of my mistake, I lost years that I could have spent getting to know you. And now? Aisha asked. Now I know that your dad was the smartest person I ever met. He saw something special in you that I was too dumb to see. James knelt down beside the couch. Aisha, do you want to come live with me? It won't be the same as the life you had with your dad, at least not right away. But I promise I'll learn, and I'll do everything I can to make you feel safe and loved. Aisha studied James's face for a long moment. Do you have a big house? I do, James said. But I'm thinking about buying a different house, one that's better for kids. With a yard where you can play, and maybe a room where we can put a telescope like your dad had. Aisha's eyes lit up slightly for the first time since the funeral. Daddy taught me about stars. He said that even when people are gone, they become stars in the sky forever. Your dad was right, James said softly. And maybe, if you want, we can keep learning about stars together. At that moment, Patricia appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her funeral suit, but now with messy hair and smudged makeup. James, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. This child is not normal. She has problems, strange quirks. Michael spent a fortune on therapy and still. Patricia, James interrupted in a steely voice, I strongly suggest you stop talking right now. Every word that comes out of your mouth only confirms that you are completely unfit to care for any child. Robert Martinez stepped forward. Mrs. Thompson, I must inform you that anything you say now can be used against you in the custody proceedings. I must also warn you that what I witnessed today could result in criminal charges for child abuse. Patricia turned pale. You can't prove anything. It was just discipline. Throwing cold water on a traumatized child on the day of her father's funeral is not discipline, James said, standing up. It's abuse. And I'm sure that further investigation will reveal that this was not an isolated incident. Maria Santos, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward timidly. Senor James, I can testify. I saw many things over the years. Things that La Senora did when Senor Michael wasn't home. Maria, you're fired, Patricia shouted from the stairs. Actually, James said calmly, Maria, I'd like you to continue taking care of Aisha if she agrees. With a substantially better salary, of course. Maria began to cry with relief. See, Senor James. I love this Nina as if she were mi propia hija. Aisha looked at Maria and then at James. Can Maria come live with us? If she wants to, and if you want her to, James confirmed. I want her to, Aisha said decisively. Maria has always been good to me. She would hug me when I had nightmares. Then it's decided, James said. Maria, would you like to help us take care of Aisha? Sí, por supuesto, Maria replied, hugging Aisha. We're going to be a real family. Patricia came down the stairs furious. You can't just reorganize my house like this. I'm the legal widow, I have rights. You had rights, Robert Martinez corrected her. But you gave them up the moment you decided to abuse the child in your care. Now, I suggest you consult a lawyer, because you will face both civil and possibly criminal proceedings. Aisha, James said, turning his attention to the girl, how about we go see your new home? We can grab some dinner on the way, and you can tell me about the things you like to do most with your daddy. Can I take my rabbit? Aisha asked. Of course you can. And all the other things that are yours. As they left the Thompson mansion, Aisha held James's hand with one hand and Maria's with the other. For the first time since the funeral, she wasn't alone. And for the first time in 10 years, James Thompson understood what family really meant. The temporary house James rented in Ansley Park was very different from his minimalist penthouse in downtown Atlanta. It was a 3-bedroom Victorian-style house with a large backyard, and most importantly, it was located in a neighborhood with several families and children. James had specifically chosen a place where Aisha could have a normal childhood. The first few days were a mix of wonderful discoveries and challenging moments. Aisha had frequent nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night crying for her father or afraid that James would change his mind and send her away. James, who had never cared for a child before, quickly learned about the patience needed to rebuild trust. Uncle James, Aisha asked on the third morning as they ate breakfast together, are you going to work today? I'm going to do some work at home, James replied. But I'm not going out. I thought we could go pick out furniture for your room. And maybe find that telescope we talked about. Aisha's eyes lit up. Can I choose the color of my room? Of course. What color do you like? Daddy said I could choose purple, but Aunt Patty said it was an ugly color. She had his room painted pink because girls should like pink. James felt that familiar anger burning in his chest. Aisha, you can choose any color you want. If you want purple, we'll make a beautiful purple room. While shopping, James watched Aisha carefully. She was polite to all the salespeople, but she always looked at James before answering questions, as if she needed permission to have her own opinions. When a saleswoman commented on her hair, "What beautiful curls. It must be a lot of work to comb," Aisha automatically touched her hair and looked nervously at James. Actually, James replied calmly, we're learning together how to properly care for her hair. By the way, do you know of any salons that specialize in afro hair? The saleswoman, a middle-aged black woman, smiled approvingly. Yes, I do. My cousin has a great salon on Auburn Avenue. I can give you her card. That afternoon, James called the salon and made an appointment, not just for Aisha, but for himself to learn how to help her with her daily care. It was the first of many lessons he would need to learn. The custody hearing on Monday was a formality, considering the evidence of abuse and the fact that James had all the necessary resources and qualifications. Patricia appeared with her own lawyer, but her attempts to portray the situation as a misunderstanding failed miserably when Maria Santos testified about years of cruel treatment she had witnessed. She would make the Nina stand for hours if she spilled anything, Maria testified. And she always talked about how she was different from other children, as if that were a bad thing. The judge granted James permanent custody with surprising speed. Mr. Thompson, he said, it's clear that you are committed to this child's well-being in a way that her stepmother never was. I grant you full custody, with a recommendation for family therapy to help with the transition. James hired Dr. Angela Washington, a child psychologist specializing in trauma and racial issues. The sessions began as individual sessions for Aisha, then included James and Maria as the family learned to function together. Aisha has developed some defense mechanisms that will take time to overcome, Dr. Washington explained after the first few sessions. She has been conditioned to minimize her needs and apologize for existing. It will take patience and consistency to reverse that. James was also learning about the realities of raising a black child in an often hostile society. When Aisha was followed in a toy store, James experienced for the first time the rage that black parents feel regularly. When a teacher at the private school he had chosen made comments about Aisha's hair being inappropriate for the dress code, James not only moved Aisha to a different school, he also filed a formal complaint against discrimination. "Uncle James," Aisha said one evening as he helped her with her hair care, something Maria had patiently taught her, "why do some people dislike me before they even know me?" James stopped combing her curls, carefully considering his response. "Some people have learned wrong ideas about people who are different from them. It's not your fault, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means they need to learn more." "How did you learn?" Aisha asked. "By getting to know you," James said simply. "And by listening to people smarter than me, like Dr. Washington and Maria." The real proof of progress came 6 months later, when Aisha gave a presentation at school about family. James expected her to talk only about Michael, but he was moved when she included him and Maria as part of her current family. "This is a picture of my dad who went to heaven," she told the class. "And this is my Uncle James who takes care of me now, and this is Maria who makes the best quesadillas in the world. My family may look different from your family, but we love each other very much." That night, James asked if she would like him to officially adopt her. "That way you would be my official daughter, not just my niece." "Can I still remember Dad?" Aisha asked. "Always," James promised. "He will always be your first dad, and I will never try to replace him. But I would love to be your second dad." "Then yes," Aisha said, hugging him tightly. "I want to be your real daughter." The official adoption took place on a sunny spring morning, a year and a half after Michael's funeral. Aisha, now 9, was wearing a purple dress she had chosen herself, her natural curls adorned with a small tiara that Maria had bought especially for the occasion. James was more nervous than he had ever been during any business negotiation he had ever conducted. "Aisha Thompson Sterling," the judge said solemnly, "do you understand what it means to be adopted?" "Yes, sir," Aisha replied with the confidence she had developed over the months. "It means that Uncle James will be my dad forever, even when I grow up and become an adult. And it means I'll be his daughter forever, too." "And do you want that to happen?" "Yes, very much," Aisha said, looking at James with a beaming smile. "He teaches me about stars like my first daddy did, and he learned how to braid my hair, and he never gets mad when I have nightmares." When the judge banged the gavel finalizing the adoption, James felt tears stream down his face. Aisha ran into his arms, and for the first time since they met, she called him Dad without hesitation. Outside the courthouse, photographers from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution captured the image that would become famous: a billionaire businessman and his 9-year-old black daughter, both smiling through tears of joy, holding the adoption certificate that legally confirmed what their hearts had known for so long. The headline the next day read, "Atlanta CEO adopts niece. Family is about love, not blood." But for James and Aisha, it wasn't news, it was simply Tuesday, and they had homework to do and stars to watch. 6 months later, they visited Michael's grave together on the 2nd anniversary of his death. Aisha brought fresh flowers and a drawing she had made of the family, her, James, Maria, and Michael watching them from heaven through a giant telescope. "Hi, Dad number 1, Aisha whispered to the headstone. "I wanted you to meet Dad number 2. He kind of looks like you now. He reads me stories, teaches me about constellations, and even learned how to do French braids on YouTube." James laughed softly, wiping away a tear. "And Dad," Aisha continued, "I think you were right about family. It doesn't matter how we became a family, what matters is that we truly love each other." That night back home, her real home now, no longer temporary, Aisha showed James a science project about adoption she was doing for school. "Dad James," she said, climbing onto his lap as she had done hundreds of times over the past few months, "did you know there's a phenomenon in space called stellar families? They're stars that weren't born together, but found each other in the universe and now travel together. James laughed softly, wiping away a tear. And Daddy, Aisha continued, I think you were right about family. It doesn't matter how we became a family, what matters is that we truly love each other. That night back home, her real home now, no longer temporary, Aisha showed James a science project about adoption she was doing for school. Daddy James, she said, climbing onto his lap as she had done hundreds of times in the past few months, did you know there's a phenomenon in space called stellar family? They're stars that weren't born together, but found each other in the universe and now travel together. James smiled, hugging his daughter and breathing in the scent of the special product they had found for her curls. Really, sweetie? Tell me more about it. Well, Aisha explained with the enthusiasm of a child in love with science, they may have started in completely different places in the galaxy, and some may shine brighter than others, but when you look through a telescope, you can see that they are all part of something beautiful together. James immediately understood that she wasn't just talking about astronomy. Like us. Exactly. Aisha said excitedly. You, me, Maria, and even Dad #1 in the sky. We're a star family. 3 years later, when Aisha was 12, she won first place at the City Science Fair with a project on star families. During her presentation, she explained to the packed auditorium, star families teach us that sometimes the best families aren't the ones we're born into, but the ones we find when we need light in the dark. In the audience, James watched proudly as his daughter, bright, confident, loved, explained complex scientific concepts to a fascinated audience. Beside him, Maria wept with pride, whispering "Mi Nina Brillante" through happy tears. After the presentation, a younger girl approached Aisha shyly. Your family seems really cool, she said. Mine is different too. My grandma raised me because my parents couldn't. Aisha smiled with the wisdom that only children who have overcome adversity possess. Different families are the best families, she said. It means someone chose to love you even when they didn't have to. That night, on the way home, Aisha asked, Dad James, do you regret adopting me? I mean, your life was simpler before. James pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to look at his daughter. Aisha Thompson Sterling, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Before you, I was successful, but I had no purpose. I had money, but I had no joy. I had a house, but I had no home. You taught me what really matters in life. Even when I wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares? Especially then, James said. Because it reminds me that you trust me to keep you safe. And when I ask tough questions about why some people are cruel. Those are the most important ones, James replied. Because they force me to be a better person and a better father. Aisha smiled and looked back out the window at the city lights. Daddy James. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for letting me find you, James replied, and they continued driving home under a starry sky that reminded them that sometimes the happiest endings come from the hardest beginnings. Because sometimes, the best families aren't the ones we're born into, but the ones we choose to build with courage, love, and a willingness to grow together through the stars. Do you have a big house like Daddy's? Aisha finally asked, her voice small but determined.